Hello Bookish Fiends and welcome to another video. I'm Kathleen and today I'm going to be sharing with you my 2024 reading wrap up. So let's jump into it. So when it comes to my 2024 reading year, it definitely had its ups and downs. At the beginning of the year, I set a goal to read, I do believe, 35 books for 2024. And the first half of the year started off in a major reading slump. I was struggling with some depression. I couldn't find the motivation to read. I was busy just trying to figure out things that were going on in my life. And I just didn't have the motivation or the desire to read. And so, well, I really didn't read. And it wasn't until about the tail end of the spring that I was able to kind of break through that reading slump, rediscover my love and passion for reading, and just really get back into it and just develop my hobby and develop this habit and become really serious and intentional about my reading hobby. So from that point forward, it has been a phenomenal reading year where I have explored all the different genres and just really actually rediscovered my passion and my love for reading. It feels like the same kind of level of passion that I had when I was a young girl and when I was a teenager, and I was a voracious reader and I was reading every and anything. And I feel like after a long time, I finally have that passion for reading and for just exploring different genres and reading different books. I have that passion back and it's so exciting. And it's just, I don't know, it made the tail end of 2024 such a phenomenal time. So before I dive into all of my favorite books of 2024 and kind of rank them and give them my own little awards or whatever, I wanted to share some of my Goodreads stats. So the first stat is the shortest book that I read. So the shortest book that I read in 2024 was The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, which is one of his short stories. And I read this on Halloween, and I thought, what better time to read this than Halloween, because I have never read that short story before. Not to my recollection, I can remember me reading that, but I enjoyed it, gave it 5 fabulous stars. It was perfection. The longest book that I read in 2024 was Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer, which is a reread, and that book was 756 pages. As y'all know, I love the Twilight Saga, and I do try to reread books from the Twilight Saga at least every year. So that was one of the books that I did a reread on this year, and of course I loved it. And when it comes to average book length in 2024, that would be 369 pages was the average length of the books that I read last year. And when it comes to the books that were the most shelved or the least shelved per Goodreads, the book that I read that was the most shelved was Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, which I love that book. It is the perfect domestic thriller in my opinion. It's everything that I'm looking for in a domestic thriller, and I gave that 5 fabulous stars. I really enjoyed it. It definitely lived up to the hype for me. And when it comes to the least shelved book that I read, that would be The Myth of American Idealism by Noam Chomsky and Nathan J. Robinson. This is kind of a history or a political type of a book, and it was very educational. It was very revealing. I took a lot from that book, and it was a very interesting experience learning more about U.S. foreign policy and how that impacts the world and how that impacts other people and how it also impacts us. And I gave that book 5 fabulous stars. Definitely an educational read if you're wanting to learn more about politics and policies and how they affect the US as well as the greater world. And when it comes to my average rating for 2024, it landed somewhere around at 4.1 stars. So typically I've kind of noticed that when it comes to books, I'm not really a harsh rater. I'm not really a harsh critic. I kind of see the good in almost everything. It takes a lot for me to rate a book fairly low. Things have to really be wrong with the writing style, the plot structure, I have to really disagree or not like the way that the characters were developed or written. So I don't know. I seem to be a pretty middle of the road reviewer. I don't really review harshly, so I think that this average review rating, it totally makes sense for me, because pretty much the majority of what I read, I enjoy. So yeah, that makes sense. And one of the highest rated, or the highest rated on Goodreads that I read in 2024 was Cricket Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. Yeah, I love that book. I gave it 5 fabulous stars. I actually love the Six of Crows duology. It's amazing. I love the Grishaverse. I don't know. It was amazing experience. Sad that the duology and all that is like over, but excited to dive more into the other books and the Grishaverse. So bittersweet. All right, so let's talk about some of the books in 2024 that left an impression on me, that I really enjoyed, and that are some of my favorite books of the year. So we're gonna start off with a bang, and we're gonna talk about the book that I have crowned to be my favorite book of 2024. After much thought, after much just, battling and just really thinking about it, I landed on that book being Welcome to the Hanam-Dong Bookshop by Hwang Bo-ram. And I read this like right at the tail end of the year, and I feel like it was the perfect time as we're on that cusp of the year ending and stepping into a new year, because this book, it was such an amazing experience. It really just changed and shifted my perception on just how I view life, how I live my life, like when it comes to pursuing my passions and my goals, and how I want to continue this phase of my life as I'm in my middle age. And just, I don't know, it was such an inspiring and aspirational read. So in this book, we're following Youngju as she has opened up a bookshop, and she's really trying to figure out how to be the best bookshop owner that she can be, and she wants to desperately make this work. She wants to, make this something that is permanent, that she can do all for the rest of her time, because it's been her dream of hers, and she desperately wants this. And we get to see kind of like her decision-making process, her thoughts when it comes to the marketing and what she should do with like ordering the books and displaying the books. We see her, all these little decisions that she's making about this, but we also get to glimpse like her perspective and how she relates to the world around her, and her perspective and her thoughts on things. And we don't just get to see that from Youngju, we get to see that from a lot of the people that frequent the bookshop, as well as some of the employees at the bookshop. We see that from the coffee shop or the cafe or the barista, as he's navigating his life and kind of his confusion and his frustration with not being where he thought that he wants to be, because he has just focused so much on school, focused so much on being successful and landing the perfect job so that he can make that 6-figure salary. And he's finding that it's not happening for him, because the jobs aren't there. They're not available for him. He can't land that job. And he's kind of stuck in this in between, and he's forced to make the decision, should he keep pursuing this track, even though it's just making him depressed and it's making him feel like a failure, or should he instead switch it up and pivot and pursue like happiness and joy, and finding what kind of career, what kind of job will give him that joy and that happiness, so he's not caught in this perpetual rat race of success and trying to be the most successful and richest person in the world. And he's kind of caught within that struggle. So we see his perspectives on things, we see his kind of journey towards what he should do with his life, and we see that with a couple of the other characters that frequent the bookstore. We see how they're also dealing with different crossroads or different things in their lives, and how they're kind of like making up their mind and understanding what's exactly going on in their life, what they want to happen, what are their passions, what are their goals. We kind of see them basically live through life making these decisions to, live the best life that they can possibly live, and just to find joy and happiness. And I don't know, I personally love slice of life stories that are like this, where people are having like personal revelations and they're just learning things about themselves, they're learning things about their life. They always impact me so heavily, and I feel like this book was so perfect, and it accomplished just that. it really did impact me and leave a positive impression on me. And I know that this book was kind of promoted and marketed as being like a cozy soul type of a book. And I totally agree with that, because there is something so cozy, so heartwarming, so just soul healing in this book that makes it so enjoyable and so beloved. And it's why it is one of my favorite books of the year, because I literally just was so blown away after I completed this book. And I gave it 5 fabulous stars, but of course. Okay, my favorite debut book of 2024, I don't know if it can really be considered a debut book, because it's not, well, it is a debut book for this author, but it's not necessarily a 2024 debut book. This is, I think, back in 2023, perhaps this book came out, but whatever. It was the only debut book by a debut author that I read this year, and it is one of my favorites, and that is The Measure by Nikki Erlich. I love the speculative element of the story as we explore a world where everyone is gifted with a box that has a string, and the string length determines how long you're going to live, and it kind of changes and shifts how everyone views and lives their life, how everyone views and lives each other, where we have short stringers and long stringers, and we follow these different people who have various string lengths and how it impacts their life and the things that they're trying to accomplish. And we get to see what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and I don't know, it was very interesting, very emotional, very heartwarming, and also heart-wrenching. I don't know, it was such a beautiful story. I really enjoyed it. It really hit home. It made me think a lot about, you know, the meaning and purpose of life. And, you know, we all really don't know when we're gonna not be here anymore. We don't know that. And I don't know, it just really was so interesting, just because, like, what would you really actually do if you knew how much time you had left? I don't know. It was such an interesting exploration of that concept, and I gave it 5 fabulous stars, and I just loved it. Okay, when it comes to my most memorable book of 2024, that would be Violeta by Isabel Allende. And this was my first foray into historical fiction. And it was such a good, I don't know, it was so good. And I'm so excited and happy that I read that book, because now I am coming to really enjoy more books from the historical fiction genre, which is a genre that I typically don't read from, but because of this book, I was like, say less. I'm gonna explore this genre some more. But in Violeta, we follow Violeta, and we see her from the beginning of her life to the tail end of her life, and we get to witness her grow up and come of age while there are a lot of tumultuous events that occur in her life, from the Great Depression to the Spanish influenza. We also see her, you know, live through a lot of political upheaval in her country. We see her, you know, deal with and struggle with a lot of complicated and potentially toxic relationships that she lives through. We see so much of her life and all that she goes through, and how it changes her, how it impacts her, for the better, and I would say in the most case, and just her philosophy and her ideology when it comes to life and to the things and people around her, what really matters. I don't know, it was such an exquisite tale. It felt so real, so palpable. It read like an autobiography, and she felt like a real person to me that was really imparting, you know, her life, and I really enjoyed that aspect of the book. It was so emotional, so tender, so raw, but at the same time so beautiful and so compelling and so just complex and so well written. I really enjoyed this novel. It was definitely going to be something that's going to forever stick in my mind. And yeah, 5 fabulous stars is what I gave it, and I really, really enjoyed it. And when it comes to the books that have my favorite characters, I'm gonna go with the Six of Crows duology, because I adored these characters. I live, breathe, and die for these characters. They are my friends, they are my babies, they are everything to me. I love them. Whew. They were so complex, so dynamic, so multidimensional, so flawed. You know, they were all morally gray to some extent. They were all very, very flawed. They weren't perfect people, but I felt like that made them even more realistic. That made them even more lovable, were their flaws and their imperfections. Because aren't we all flawed and imperfect when we really sit down and think about it? And that's what made them so real and palpable to me. And I was so invested in who they were and so invested in how they came to be. And a lot of their backstories were so tragic and so heart-wrenching. And I don't know, I just love to see their journey, love to see how all these people with these different backgrounds kind of were able to come together and work for a common cause and for a common good, despite, you know, the frictions that they kind of had. I don't know. It just really was amazing. And I think another reason why I like this is because it reminded me of, I don't know if anyone knows the TV show Leverage. It really reminded me of that kind of show. If you've never seen Leverage, it's amazing. But it put that into my mind, and it gave me the same feeling as watching that show did. And I loved it. These characters, I'll do anything for them. I adore them. I love them. And when it comes to my favorite new fantasy series, that crown is taken by Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. So the Legendborn cycle, I'm obsessed with this series because there's just something to be said about seeing a fantasy series with a beautiful Black female lead on the cover of this book and in this story. That is amazing for a Black female who has read fantasy all of her life and who, when she was younger, never really saw that representation, never saw somebody that looked like her, that had hair like her, you know, on the cover of a fantasy book. To now see this now and see this uprising of this kind of representation in fantasy right now is amazing. I'm here for it. I'm sat in this series. I love it. I adore it. For a young adult series, not that I'm saying that young adult series are not complex, but I feel like this is so well written. Tracy Deonn is an amazing genius because the way that she built this world up, the way that she just created this really, really complex but interesting and unique magic system. The world building is so immaculate. She really has created an immersive world. And the way that she just kind of structured everything in the story is bonkers. She structured it, she paced it, everything, I don't know, was like chef's kiss. She did an amazing and excellent job on the story and these characters. These characters are so dynamic, so complex. Bree is such a complex and just a multi-dimensional character. And just the way that in this first book, which is I've only read this first book, I'm waiting for Bloodmark to be delivered so I can jump into that. But seeing Bree's just growth and expansion and evolution in book 1, I could only imagine how much more growth and evolution that this young woman is going to encounter on her journey in the upcoming installments of this series. And I'm here for it. I love it. So this has definitely taken the crown for my favorite new fantasy series in 2024. Next, my favorite new romance series is the Dream Harbor series by Laurie Gilmore. And I know not a lot of people, it's kind of touch and go for some people, but listen, I like it. Is it cheesy? Quite possibly. Quite possibly. Does it read like a Hallmark movie? Absolutely. Absolutely. But sometimes you need something to give you these silly, goofy, happy vibes. And this just does that for me. It does it in such a interesting and beautiful way as to not like, I don't know, it doesn't take itself too serious, but at the same time, it does have more serious and complex elements included in the romance, in my opinion, making it a lot more interesting and just really, I guess, kind of like relatable in some ways, in some senses. And I appreciated that. And while I guess I can only speak specifically to the Pumpkin Spice Cafe, There has been some of the miscommunication trope present in this romance series, and I really hate miscommunication, but I like the way that it was kind of wrapped up and it was handled by the other person who kind of was the one who triggered the miscommunication. I like how it was kind of handled and it was kind of wrapped up and it was resolved. And I really felt like because I've only read 2 from this series, mind you. I've only read The Pumpkin Spice Cafe and The Christmas Tree Farm. But I like how they handle the resolutions for the quote-unquote third act breakup. I like how they're all resolved. I like how they're able to talk and work through things and move forward into their relationship. I don't know. I just feel like their relationships are pretty healthy and sound because they do work through their issues and, come up with solutions to move forward. And I really like that. So it's definitely one of my favorite romance series of 2024. So one of the saddest and most emotional books that I read in 2024 is The Last Love Note by Emma Gray. And in this story, we're following Katie as she's still kind of struggling to find her balance in life after losing her husband 2 years ago, Cameron. And she just feels like she's a mess. And she just feels like her life is in constant chaos. She struggles with her guilt and with her, I won't say her guilt, but I would say, I would say guilt. She struggles with her grief and her guilt concerning her husband's loss. She's grieving him not being there anymore, but she feels guilt for, I do believe, just this desire or this feeling of wanting to move forward with her life and wanting better for her life. But she kind of stops herself and keeps herself stagnant, remaining just where she is and not really allowing herself to move forward because of that fear, because of her grief, because of her guilt, and her not really wanting to let her husband go. And this book is a beautiful exploration of her kind of untangling all of those feelings and actually having the courage to finally let go and move forward. And it was such a beautiful exploration of grief, of, learning how to live your life without someone and to move on and to move forward. It was so poignant, so touching, and it had me tearing up. It was really, really good. I really enjoyed reading this, and it has been crowned the saddest book of 2024, but at the same time, the most amazing. Yeah. Definitely give this a read if you want to feel all the feels. All right, so next, the funniest book that I read in 2024. I'm gonna preface this with this. It's not necessarily that this book is like a comedy or that it's humorous. It's just the way that it tells this story is in a very humorous and comedic way. And that is A Wedding People by Alison Espach. And in this story, we are following Phoebe as she is really gearing up to have the best night of her life because she has plans to unalive herself. She is just at a very low point in her life. But everything goes awry when she arrives at this hotel and discovers that there is a wedding party there. She gets mistaken for one of the wedding guests, and all of her plans are thrown asunder. And then she runs into the bride, and they develop this tenuous friendship, and they begin to open up to one another and just kind of like develop this beautiful bond. And we get to see throughout this story how she interacts with not just the bride, but with the wedding people or the wedding party as a whole, and how all of these events and all of these things that happen really affect her and change the trajectory of her life. So this is a very, this is a poignant story. It really is. It's poignant, it's heartbreaking, and it's beautiful, and it does give you all the feels. But I felt for me, the humor really hit, and that's because it was that dark humor, and it counteracted all of the sadness, all of the poignancy, kind of all of what could really be uncomfortable and heavy, like feelings when it's coming to these kind of heavier, more difficult topics in life situations, and all of those things. It balanced it out with the dark humor, making it more, giving it a more softer blow, so it doesn't like hit you hard in the face. And I think that's why this book was kind of funny and humorous to me is the way that it dealt with these heavy topics in such a kind of funny, humorous, sarcastic, kind of tongue-in-cheek way. But at the same time, you could still glean and you could still learn from these things, and you could still see Phoebe's growth and her evolution throughout the story, as well as the growth and evolution of all the other characters that she was able to have an impact on. So I enjoyed this book very, very much. If you want something that is, or you prefer a book that is able to handle heavy topics with care while also being humorous and kind of softening the blow of everything, this will be an ideal book for you. Now, when it comes to the book that altered my brain chemistry, that award would have to go to We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver. When I tell you, this book was wild. In this story, we are following Eve and Charlie as they have purchased this remote house in the Pacific Northwest, and they're in the throes of flipping that house. And on one Friday evening, Eve is waiting for Charlie to come back home, where they're gonna have a quiet evening in. And lo and behold, she has a family of 4 that shows up at her doorstep, with the father Thomas claiming that he wants to give his family a tour of the home because he actually grew up there. And reluctantly, Eve says, yeah, come on in and show your family around. And that's when the madness ensues and this story takes a drastic turn. This was a wild ride. It was very much a psychological horror, very much really kept you guessing, and really manipulated your thoughts, manipulated your feelings. It was very atmospheric. It gave this constant sense of dread and foreboding, where you just knew something bad was gonna happen and you just didn't know what, and it was just so eerie, unsettling, and I really appreciated that. Yeah, it's just one of those books that upon reading it, you're constantly thinking and chewing over what happened in the book as you're just trying to figure everything out still. And I like books like that. I like books that kind of give you kind of this unsettling, odd ending that you're left to kind of chew and ponder over and think about. I don't know. I really liked it. I feel like you would really enjoy this book if you enjoy the Cloverfield movie. If you enjoyed the movie the Cloverfield, I think is it called the Cloverfield? Whatever. The Cloverfield if you enjoyed that movie, you would enjoy We Used to Live Here. Same kind of vibes. Loved it. And when it comes to my new favorite author for 2024, that award goes to Miss Isabel Cañas. And I enjoyed The Hacienda and Vampires of El Norte, and her prose is ridiculous. She writes so eloquent, so beautiful. She does not have any business writing as beautifully as she does, because it is so emotional. It's so atmospheric. It's so just, it pulls you into the story. It makes you feel things. I love her prose and her writing style. Very well written. I love her stories. I love how they all have this historical element to them. And I love the characterization. I love how she kind of structures and just the character development that she provides us through her characters, and that they're very multidimensional. They're very complex. They're very multi-layered, and I love that. I love exploring these characters, their minds, what they're going through, how they interact with all these different things, and how it changes. I also love that in her books, she kind of always has like a little romantic subplot kind of going on, and I feel like she is able to write longing and just angst and just kind of like unrequited love. She is able to write that so beautifully that you really flippin' feel it, and I love every bit of it. I cannot wait for her newest release in 2025, The Possession of Alba Diaz, I do believe, which it comes out, I think, in my birthday month, August the 19th. Anxious to get that in my hands because love her, and yeah. And when it comes to my favorite nonfiction, that will have to go to Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann. I really enjoyed reading and learning more about the Osage indigenous people and kind of what they went through when it came to their head rights concerning the oil on their land, and basically having that like stolen and, you know, being manipulated out of their money, being murdered and killed for their money and their head rights. It was such just a shocking tale to kind of see the bigotry, the hatred, the classism, this belief that they were less than and that they didn't deserve what they got, that they were, you know, by even the government at the time, they were kind of considered not that there's something I'm saying. What is the word I'm looking for? They weren't considered in their right mind or of sound mind to manage and take care of their own money. They had to be appointed someone to dispense their money to them, and they were ripping them off. Like, I don't know, I found this so angering, frustrating, and heartbreaking that these people were manipulated and treated as such. It's such an important and piece of history, and I am grateful for being able to read and learn more about this story. And yeah, this is definitely my favorite nonfiction of 2024. Lastly, when it comes to 2024, I did kind of branch out and explore a lot more new and different genres. As I mentioned earlier, I was able to explore more from the historical fiction genre, and I really enjoyed that. I have a new appreciation for historical fiction. I like the awareness that you get from reading about these kind of historical events, or you get reading about people set in earlier time and their struggles and the things that they went through, and you know, how we can learn from these things and how it can impact us and give us more awareness about our history so that we can actually be encouraged or inspired to learn more about the history of that time. I really appreciate that from the historical fiction genre. I also appreciated learning from actual like politics, something that I've never really dived into because I just find politics to be so overwhelming and so angering and triggering. But it's something that moving forward, I want to make sure I do my due diligence of educating myself about so that I can vote more intelligently and make better decisions and have more of an impact and influence on my community. So I have enjoyed exploring that genre and kind of educating myself on politics and how that affects us. And yeah, that I'm enjoying that. I've also been enjoying reading more just history, learning more about history, not just US history, not just Black history, but how history, where it's world history, kind of impacts all of us. And the thing that I kind of notice is similar with a lot of like Black history is just the presence of bigotry, the presence of colonialization, the presence of like hatred, the presence of superiority, and people thinking they're racially superior to somebody else is just so present in world history. It's not just a US thing. And I think sometimes living in the US, we think it's a white versus a Black thing, but it's kind of really everywhere when you really read and look into history. And also when you look into history, you see how US has played a role in a lot of other, you know, communities and countries. I don't know. I'm enjoying learning more about history, being educated, educating myself. I've been enjoying that. I've also read from the dark academia genre, which I adore. And I had such a good time reading from that genre. I read The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which is a quintessential, like, dark academia book. I read If We Were Villains by Emma Rio, and that was amazing. I don't know. I really enjoy that genre. I can't wait to read more from that genre in 2025. I also started dabbling a little bit in the dark romance genre, and that has been interesting. Very, very interesting. And I have been having a good time, you know, exploring that genre. So yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of reading more from these different and various genres and just really kind of exploring all that there is available and out there to read. As a person who just really loves reading, I really love storytelling. I really love, you know, writing and how people structure stories. I just love it. So I'm looking forward to more of that coming in 2025. So that is my reading wrap up for 2024. It started off not so great, but it ended amazing. So yeah, let's get ready and get amped up and get pumped up for 2025 and the fact that it's going to be an amazing reading year, and looking forward to seeing you more here on this channel. And make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.